think it's interesting that, and I say this a lot, I think data science and machine learning, what we're doing now is it's just a cornerstone. Like we're building pieces of foundation and that's it, which is crazy because of how much we're doing.
This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is powered by Z by HP, HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Vin Vashishta. Vin works in applied machine learning and strategy, and he builds and brings projects to market with ARR in the hundreds of millions. He spent over 25 years working in tech and the last 10 working in data science and machine learning. Since 2015, he's been frequently recognized as one of the thought leaders in this great field that I love. In this episode, we talk about what the future of data science looks like based on its history, how new data companies may have an advantage over older ones, and how you can create opportunities for yourself within the data science field. I hope you enjoy. Vin, thank you so much for joining me today on the Ken's Nearest Neighbors podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. We met in one of Harpreet's data science happy hours. And I couldn't be happier. You had such incredible stuff to those conversations. You have a great, incredible perspective on the future of this field, the current state of this field, and how we as individuals can integrate and be a part of this field as well. So I'm super stoked to have you come in and talk about your experience on this journey through data science.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. We've already had some really good conversations on Harpreet's office hour. And that's been, well, his office hour always turns into 2 office hours, doesn't it? So yeah, his office hours. Yeah, we've already had some great conversations. So I've been looking forward to this.
Absolutely. And we had a little preamble conversation, and I'm so excited to share some of the high level thoughts that we discussed. The first thing I like to do is to help you get acquainted with the listeners. And to do that, I like to ask how you first got introduced to data. You know, was it something that was this profession, something you kind of stumbled into, or was there this pivotal moment where you're like, wow, I love this. I need to go deep into this field.
You know, I fell in love with it when I was reading some Isaac Asimov books, and I didn't know it was data at that point. There, the iRobot series and the Foundation series, and they were really interesting. And they talked about building out robotics, and they talked about, you know, this whole field that didn't really exist yet, that was AI. And so that's when I really fell in love with the idea of doing machine learning and data science. And I was a kid. And so I went to college, thought I was going to graduate, to work for Microsoft on AI. And when I graduated, nobody was doing AI. Nobody was doing data science or machine learning. And so, I kind of hit a brick wall. So fell in love with data really early on. But it was this long, struggle to get back to it from about 1996, 97, when I thought, okay, I'm ready for my first internship at Microsoft for AI, and that just wasn't happening. And then finally, 2010, 2011, getting back into it. So I've been in love with the field forever. I truly love the fact that you can use data to figure things out that nobody else knows. Like those moments, those are probably the most exciting for me. When I've figured so, when I look at a model, I'm deconstructing and I go, wait a minute. I think I just found something. And it's that moment where it's like, yes. That's what got me hooked. That's what keeps me hooked.
I absolutely love those kind of, for me, I call them defining moments of an analysis where you're like, okay, everything else, like I could probably intuit to that. Yeah. But because of the tools we're using, we understand something about the problem that potentially no one has ever understood before.
Yes.
How often in science nowadays, I mean, it's probably pretty frequent, but in physics or math or some of these other disciplines, is there something that is completely new that you find? In this field, it happens every day, sometimes more than every day for an individual person, which is crazy and like unbelievably inspiring.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's that moment where you just look at something and go, wait a minute. I found something. I can't wait to tell everybody else. And, then I got to back myself off and go, okay, no, you got to prove this out. Now you got to do the real work. You can't just yell it out.
Well, something I find really interesting about the story you just described about your interest in it and the capabilities not necessarily being available there, is that machine learning or data science or AI is one of these fields where it was like a perfect mix where we had the compute power, the data, and the actual technology algorithms. The technology algorithms have been around for actually a very long time, right? Since almost the 60s, 70s. But the ability to leverage them in the way that we do now, it's like a very recent occurrence. And it's a field that could not have existed previously because of the constraints of these two other factors, data quantity and compute power. And that makes me wonder what other fields are going to arise when compute power or data or some other factor, some qualification gets fulfilled. That's exciting for all of technology in general, is that there could be a lot out there. There could be an entire discipline that hasn't been unlocked yet in that path that we're going. And so I think this little excitement you had then, I hope kids out there now are excited about this field, but also what else could be. And hopefully they're stumbling onto these fields that haven't been unlocked yet as well.
I think it's interesting that, and I say this a lot, I think data science and machine learning, what we're doing now, it's just a cornerstone. Like, we're building pieces of foundation, and that's it, which is crazy because of how much we're doing and how much we're creating and how much we've enabled. But I think it's just a cornerstone. I think what comes next in about 5 or 10 years, I think we'll see the real potential realized. I think that's about 5 or 10 years away. We'll start seeing the really interesting use cases. And I just wonder where it goes, because we all thought we'd have flying cars by now. When I was growing up, it was flying cars. Everybody's like, oh yeah, we're going to have flying cars. We're going to be going to the moon, and, we're going to be doing all sorts of stuff on space stations. And like, now we're just getting to flying cars and space stations. But we did all this cool stuff in the middle that nobody really thought was going to happen. And so it's like you said, like, what's the cool stuff in the middle that's going to happen between, now and the Terminator becoming real and all this other stuff that we're joking about now.
Well, I remember even like in the early 2000s or whenever the iPhone came out, maybe it was like 2008 or something like that. And I remember thinking that, like, this technology, at least I don't remember seeing it in any sci-fi movies or seeing it in any of these futures. And if I were to see that in a movie, I would have thought it was fake. I remember thinking, like, some of the mock-ups of the first iPhone, I was like, that can't be real. That's like way too out there. And now it seems like very normal, and tablets are just like what we do on a day-to-day basis. But again, these opportunities, these possibilities that could be out there with technologies that we can't even conceptualize right now, like flying cars, right? Very easy to conceptualize. We have a car, we have planes, some sort of hybrid, but there's so many things that we can't as easily materialize in our heads. And those are always going to, in my mind, those are even more advanced than we could expect them to be. And that to me is so cool, is we're living in past what we've envisioned the future to be, but also behind what we envision the future to be in a I guess, some other dimension.
It's interesting the way our sci-fi, because Star Trek was the only one to have like the tablet. They were the only one. It was the Next Generation where they had this tablet thing that they would wander around with. And I think it was like the 90s or something like that, where the Star Trek shows that's the Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, they actually had tablets. But I watch sci-fi shows now, and I'm thinking, we're like all out of original ideas. Normally sci-fi says, hey, there's this cool thing, I'm just going to throw this out there. And, an army of kids, like, I was a kid, go, oh, I'm totally making that when I grow up. And then it becomes real. But I watch our sci-fi now, and it's like, where's all that stuff? Where is all this cool stuff that, it's like, okay, holograms. Come on, man. You got to have something better than that. And now we're talking about time travel. I'm like, okay, that's better. I like time travel, but that kind of scares me a little bit. But what else you got? And I think we've hit a plateau where our imaginations haven't caught up with the advances that we've already done. And I think that's an interesting side effect of how fast progress goes, is when you look at sci-fi, like in 1900s all the way up to, like, early 2000s, there was a slow progression of technology. And so you had time to sit there and think about it. And if you're a sci-fi writer, you could think about, what could I do with this thing before it was actually made? And now it's almost like it gets made faster than you could figure out what would happen and what were the implications and all of this. So I mean, we're like building sci-fi in reality. And I think that's what's amazingly cool, is that we're not waiting for the book anymore or the movie. It's no, I'm just going to build that. And people do. Those are startups, and those are all of these things that are coming out now. Like, people say crazy ideas. No, it's like they publish it on an archive and it's real. And a year later it's built. And there's a prototype that's on a GoFundMe or, Kickstarter.
Hopefully iRobot does not become real anytime soon. That I think that would be a little concerning. And there's always the double-edged sword as well.
Yep. Yeah,
that we hope they're used in positive ways.
Yeah, we are definitely going ahead of our ethical thinking. And so in a lot of cases, we're moving so fast with technology. We're moving in a naive way, but we've always done that. And we've always sort of had to, and as a generation, it's like our generation is cleaning up the technological messes of 2 and 3 generations ago. And, 2 generations ahead of us are going to be cleaning up our technological messes. And I think that's the cost of progress, is that we leave, our children and our grandchildren with a little bit of debt when it comes to cleaning up some of the messes that allow for all the cool stuff that they have. They also have to come in behind us with a mop. And, sort of because we weren't smart enough to know what would happen 20 years from now, they have to clean up after our short-sightedness. And I hope someday we're smart enough to stop doing that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's also a scary thing, is that the debt that we accumulate, I think it increases faster than we can clean it up as well. And so someone or some generation is going to have to be really smart to be able to clean out the backlog of technical debt that I guess not technical debt, but it's the backlog of hazardous digital waste.
Yep. Yeah, and we have a lot of that just wandering around, and there's parts of this that we haven't thought of either. What does the implication of what models we're building right now, 5 years from now, like 5 years of improvements from now?
Yeah.
What are the implications of the model that we've already built? Not, if we at machine learning just flatline with the tools and the infrastructure and the capabilities we have, just imagine 5 years more training on everything that's in production right now, how much better it's going to be. And what are the implications of that just across the board?
Yeah. And what does better mean? I mean, to me, something that has been very scary for me is social media in general. And yes, I have a lot of social media presence. I'm on YouTube, I'm creating these things. But I look at how, for example, Instagram affects me. And I'm like, whenever I get on these apps, I'm addicted. I have to put in very clear structures in place to not be overwhelmed by the technology or constantly on them. But I'm a full-grown adult. I think I'm very disciplined compared to, a random sample. But those apps are designed to keep you on them as long as possible. Like, that is the good in their scenario, right? That is a good algorithm. And when we're looking at kids, for example, on social media, we look at people who are developing. That to me is like one of those things we're hopefully going to have to figure out, is that, our kids are, their brains are being reprogrammed by a lot of this technology on a constant basis, and they're growing up in this generation. I mean, I was fortunate that I didn't have any social media until I was almost 18. And some would say I was unfortunate for that. I mean, it's like an age thing. And, not to age you a little bit, but I think you had social media maybe even a little bit after that. And
maybe a little bit.
Just a day or two, but it's interesting to see how this has affected me when I'm kind of between these generations. And it's something I think we should be very seriously evaluating and figuring out how the technology or other advancements in technology can help to potentially solve that problem or assist in the issues that are going to be raised there.
Somebody said something very interesting, and I'm not going to say who it is because I don't want to put them on blast, but they said that Facebook will be the next Purdue Pharma. And you think about that and the implications of it, and it's feasible. That's what's kind of crazy is you think about 10 years from now, 10 years ago, nobody thought anything about Purdue Pharma. We didn't really have a thumbs up or a thumbs down, but now, that's almost like the evil empire. When you say Purdue Pharma, you definitely got a negative stigma about it because of the opioid crisis and the level of addiction that created and propagated through everyone. And if you think about Facebook, not far off.
Yeah, different type of addiction. I mean, and it is like, at least for me, it is, of anything that I've ever done, like social media is by far the most addictive thing that I experience on a semi-regular basis. Not that I have done anything else overwhelmingly addictive. I live a pretty clean lifestyle, but I mean, it's interesting to look at it from that perspective. I again think I have pretty good willpower, pretty good systems in place, but I have to be very wary, especially because I'm kind of knee deep in it myself.
Stephen King wrote, "We are all needful things." I mean, that was the premise of one of his books, is that we are all needful things. And it's completely true. And social media caters to that. No matter what you need, social media has the thing that can meet that need for you. And it is the thing that you want. Since we are needful things, social media is so powerful because no matter what type of attention you want, no matter what type of validation you're looking for, no matter what shiny object that you want to share with the rest of the world, or you want the rest of the world to share with you, it's there. And so that's the power of the drug, is whatever thing you need, it has, and it'll give it to you.
That's a very scary concept. I mean, I think, to that point, social media, humans are inherently social creatures, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're extroverted, introverted, whatever it might be, but it also allows you to have access to social dynamics, social situations, without the obvious anxiety or without a lot of these things that would prevent you from doing that in real life. And, knocking down those barriers, but having all of those positive addictive elements of social relationships, I want to make clear, are very good. If they are actual social relationships and not purely observational or whatever that might be, but a very relevant and scary field to look out for in the next, maybe even next year or two. But
it's happening now because as data scientists, we're building these recommenders. We're building the addiction machines. We are, as a field, getting so much behavioral data from social media that we ourselves as a field are addicted. If you're doing any sort of behavioral work, you are getting data from social media, because that's almost the best possible source, because people there, it's almost like a Westworld thing. People there are raw themselves. Most people, and you see this if you do any sort of surveys or any sort of psychological experiments, you have to hide what you're trying to get from people, because they'll lie just to the ends of the earth before they'll tell you the truth about what it is that you're really trying to get out of them. But on social media, they're real. You can gather quality of behavioral data it's far superior, because there's no mask. There is no, mask that you have to worry about debiasing off of. People are people. It's raw emotion. It's impulsive. It's great behavioral data. But, so we're addicted as data scientists, and we are building all of these different models on top of data from social media. And some of us are building models that allow social media to gather data better, or to become more addictive, or to increase the time on device. And so it's not really a year from now. It's been going on for 5 years. We're knee deep in it as a field too. There's almost no way to disambiguate data science from social media. It's almost ubiquitous.
Yeah. That's something I've been, I think, very honest with, is hey, for the most part, we're part of the problem, but we're also entirely responsible for the solution. And that's something that I think it should be weighing heavily on data scientists. Like if we've created these things that they can optimize for like advertising eyeballs, for example, right?
Mhm.
Or optimize for watch time or optimize for whatever it is, we absolutely have the capabilities to create systems that also optimize for mental health or some of these other positive things that are associated with these platforms. And I would hope that there's enough good people or enough pushback from communities to get things going more towards that direction.
I think that has to come from consumers. And I think that's always going to be the problem, is that until consumers change their behaviors, there's no incentivization to change the behaviors of companies. And so companies are in many ways slaves to consumer behavior, just because our system is capitalistic. So, number one, we either as a society have to move past, capitalism to something better, something else. Who knows if that's out there, or if we have ideas that would be better than capitalism, or people have to decide they want something grander. They want something, beyond the Kardashians and all of these different types of lifestyles that we've propagated and that we've elevated. They want something beyond, an NFL life or MMA driven cultural experiences, because all of these are great, but they have limitations. Are they really fulfilling? No. If they were, people would be happier. So we have to aspire to something better as consumers. And until we do that collectively and decide that we want something better for ourselves, there is always going to be a company out there willing to give us the fix that we're looking for.
And is that I suppose that there isn't a good answer for that, but is that an information game? Is that a data problem as well? Or, is it?
It's a behavioral problem. It really is that we've peaked in a lot of ways as just species. This is as good as any species has ever had it. This is, pure dominance for us. So we really are now the drivers of what comes next. It used to be that there would be some threat that would force us
ourselves, right?
Yeah, nature would force us in one direction or another. And so we would have to adapt on nature's schedule. But we're not on nature's timeline anymore. And so we are ill-equipped to be the drivers of our own progress because no species has ever had to do that. So we're the drivers of our own progress. We decide our own direction. We're doing a really bad job of that right now. But we have the capability to do better. We have enough information out there now to help us just nation by nation, globally even, decide, look, this isn't, this is interesting. Yes, we should keep some of the good pieces of it. Social media is amazing in so many different ways. But if we start talking about what else we could do, what else is possible, and I think you see in the pandemic, the redefinition of work. What else is possible? And one of the things that I'm seeing in the data is there are fewer people who have to take a second job. And that's an enormous change. And I don't think we've really thought through what that all means. If you don't have to have two jobs, you have more leisure time. If one job now pays you as much as two used to, and if you can get full-time hours in one job where it used to be you would have to have two jobs and add up the part-time hours to make full-time, now that more people are working one job full-time, they're getting access to better benefits. So they have more leisure time. They have the ability to better themselves now. Because before it was really just, I've got an hour here before I pass out and I have to go get on my next shift. That was the old way. And now many people don't have that second job. And so they have the ability to better themselves. And where are we going to be in 5 years worth of people having enough time to take care of themselves, to spend more time with their families, and to decide how they want to better themselves? What's that going to do? And so there are all of these interesting alternatives now that we're presenting each other, where what if you didn't have to drive to work every day? What if, if you had a crisis at home, you were home because you work from home. And so you can just go handle the crisis, and it doesn't affect your productivity that much. It's 20 minutes. You handled the crisis. You're back on the clock. You work an extra 20 minutes at the end of the day.
It could actually help your
work.
productivity. If in that front, if something goes wrong, you're there to deal with it rather than you worrying about it all day and not getting anything done.
And I mean, you think about all the implications here. What's next? And I think we're teaching each other what better looks like.
Yeah, well, that's a little bit the idea. Not to get political, believe what you want about the system. There's a lot of holes in it, but that's kind of the idea behind universal basic income by Andrew Yang, is that if people have this subsidized income, they can spend time not working that other job and doing things that are more fulfilling that could turn into businesses. Obviously, there are a tremendous amount of challenges with that, but I think that at a macro level, it's very powerful. Is that I believe enough in humans and in entrepreneurship that if people have more free time, inevitably some people will use that time very well and will use it to create surplus, probably like a very disproportionate amount of surplus in the economy. Some people, I think, are all free riders as well, and that becomes like a microeconomic problem. But I personally really believe in the idea that and maybe this is from my background, where I work a job where I can take time to do content, or I can take time to feed the leisure, whatever it is. And I found so much value in having more of that freedom to be able to create and generate and build communities and whatever that might be. I don't think everyone is necessarily wired how I am, but I would love to see a world where people did have the ability to like bring things that they care about into the world, having to worry less about the individual personal cost or the opportunity cost of doing those things. And I think we'd have better art, right? We'd have better food. We'd have more advanced technology. We'd have some crazy stuff, technology stuff, or whatever it might be. I will say though, I feel as though that's script is yet to be written, which is also kind of fun. Like, I don't know if that's right. I would like it to be right. But there's two sides to that story. It could just completely devolve in that same situation.
I think people are inherently lazy because that's the best way to be. There's nothing wrong with that. We have this negative connotation for laziness, and it's not negative. Being able to have time to relax and do things that are enjoyable, and sometimes just do nothing. Like, you think about us 500 years ago, there was a whole lot of we're not doing anything.
A whole lot of nothing.
There was a whole lot of not doing anything time. And so this concept of laziness, is a newer concept, where lazy is don't work 12 hours a day. It's like, oh, no, laziness, that's not laziness. And so I think once we look at laziness differently, once we look at positive and negative characteristics differently, once we look at productivity and efficiency and the ability to create social value, not just capitalistic value. And I think data reveals this. And that's one of the roles we have as data scientists, is we have to reveal the rules of all of the games that we play. So if you think about game theory, really the majority of games that we're involved in on a daily basis, most people don't understand the rules of each one of those games. They're simply playing and doing what they've been told to do and making a minimal number of decisions for themselves. So they don't understand the game. It's not the Matrix, but you get where I'm going with when I say it's like the Matrix, where you're stuck doing these things, but you don't understand the larger constructs. And data can reveal that. You could have an app on your phone that explained some of the deeper concepts of everything that you interact with. That's the power of things like knowledge graphs that Google's creating. You can begin to understand sort of the governing dynamics of work environments, of businesses, of you starting a business potentially, of you spending more time creating content, of you spending more time with your family, of you spending time instead of, playing Candy Crush or one of those fun, I love these things games that just eats up your brain, but makes you feel wonderful. What if I spent half of that time helping, my son, my daughter, my children with their homework? And data can help you understand the long-term consequences of these small investments and small changes in behavior. What if instead of having French fries with my meal, I just skipped the French fries? What would the long-term consequences of that be? And when you begin to have something that allows you to interact with these complex systems and understand the rules that govern all these things that are happening around you, you can make better decisions. And that's, I think, one of the things that we have not tapped into as data scientists is just handing over that power, because we have it and we kind of know it implicitly, that we understand these complex systems really, really well because we have data that gives us insight and eventually the ability to model them. But when you put yourself in the shoes of someone who's a CEO who doesn't understand their business model very well, and you realize I can, with data and analytics, sometimes really just simple analytics, I can help you understand your business model better and help you make better strategic decisions. When you start realizing people don't actually have access to this type of information and don't have the right mindset and skill set to take advantage of the information that they do have, when you make those changes in people, when you help them understand how easy it is to see long-term consequences and measure the impact of short-term decisions long-term, that's a game changer from a decision standpoint. And so I think that's one of the pieces we haven't unlocked yet, is giving people the ability to understand the world around them better and understand how their interactions with the world impact their life and the lives of everyone around them.
Yeah, I think that idea is really beautiful. And there's a book that I think does a decent job of understanding that. And analogies are very powerful in our minds. And there's a book called Finite and Infinite Games. I'm not sure if you've read it, but it talks about that construct. And it's that if we know we're in a game, right? If we know we're in a system, we can figure out a way to maximize that system, or a way to win that system. If we don't realize that we're in a system, or we don't realize there are different systems, we're stuck, right? We're just going to be playing and we don't even know we're playing. And so the idea that there are parts in our life and the way that we frame the games that we're playing allows us to win or lose them is something I think is very powerful. And you're right. I never, when I read that book, I didn't think about the data interaction or our ability to see through these systems with the power of data. But that to me is kind of a game-changing thing, is that if we know we're in a game, all these games have data. That allows us to unlock these systems even further than just conceptualizing what a win and a loss is. It allows us to see how to win or how to lose more effectively, which is, again, a very powerful thing. I would like to change gears, since we're talking about these systems and games, and get a little bit more of a story of your career and how you've understood these individual games, maybe as a career path, or gotten to the next level. And then what does that look like for you, or what has that looked like for you? This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is brought to you by Z by HP. HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Z is specifically made for high performance data science solutions, and I personally use the ZBook Studio and the Z4 workstation. I really love that the Z line can come standard with Linux, and they also can be configured with the data science software stack. With the software stack, you can get right into the work of doing data science on day one without the overhead of having to completely reconfigure your new machine. Now back to our show.
For me, I think the biggest realization of my career was that I couldn't be in technology my whole life. Like, I could not be an individual contributor for my entire life. And that, this is one of those things, what we were talking about, the dynamics of the game. Think about it. As you get more and more senior, there are fewer senior jobs. There are a lot more low-level jobs and mid-level jobs than there are high-level. Senior principal, distinguished, and all of these other great sounding titles that you run into fewer and fewer and fewer opportunities. And so I realized really about 10 years into my career that if I didn't do something else, if there wasn't some other level to my career, I was out of luck. I was going to be out of technology by 35, 40, because I was competing with people who were just as good as I am for jobs that, fewer and fewer jobs. And no one was going to want to hire me at a higher salary then they could get somebody else to do the same job. And so that's, and that's one of the rules of the career game that no one teaches you, is that it is unlikely you'll be able to take your entire career as an individual contributor unless you are perpetually creating some sort of next level skill set for yourself. And after a while, that becomes really hard to do unless you're willing to just take the same salary and plateau, and that's it. But so, and I've gone through this progression where I understand I had to go into leadership. So I went into leadership. I understood strategy was kind of the next thing. So I went into strategy. And now I'm seeing this thing, this creator, where it's the next step past entrepreneur, where you get to a point where no one else is going to give you the next opportunity. And so I had to make it for myself. That's when I started my business. No one else was going to give me the next promotion. They didn't believe in me enough. And so I gave myself an opportunity by starting a business, going out, getting clients, selling them on this crazy data science thing, and telling them, hey, you could do so much with your data, and then coming in and showing them, giving them some results, going from client to client and building up a reputation. I gave myself the chance, which I think is the promise of entrepreneurship, is at some point you hit the plateau in your career where no one's going to give you the opportunity that you deserve. And so you have to make it for yourself. You have to create the space. And after that, it feels like there's a creator economy or creator role where you are building something different. And I don't fully understand what I'm doing. Just kind of like when I started a business, I didn't 100% understand what I was getting myself into. But I'm learning it as I go, beginning to understand what creating means beyond just building a product. What's an intangible creator? What does a creator create? What can I create that's outside of the normal business product stream? And then how do I monetize it? And I think, at a very generic level, that's my career. And I think that's, kind of overextending the metaphor of talking about systems and exposing game rules. But those are the rules that I've found, is that you go from an individual contributor to a multiplier for someone else, which is a leadership or a strategy role. And then you decide to be a multiplier for yourself. And that's entrepreneurship. And then you start to be almost this community multiplier where you're building other versions of yourself and you're teaching people how to do the things you've done and understand the things that you've understood and share some of the passions that you've developed and curated. And that's where you become a multiplier across a community, because you are building other multipliers. It's interesting. It's sort of this arc that I've enjoyed it. It's been confusing and scary the whole way through, but I don't think I'd be happy any other way.
I resonate so much with that, and I love it. I think we both view the end game in a very similar way, as we're creating these things, and that's an extension of us. And it's the ability to leverage the exact skill set that you have in as effective a way as possible. To me, I got through that same route, not by rising up and realizing, oh, I'm hitting a ceiling. It's that I just frankly didn't want to go through all the steps. I saw, wow, this is going to take me 15 years to get to that next step. I can leverage the skills that I have now that are multidisciplinary, that are unique to me, that I think are not necessarily, I don't think I'm better at data science than the average data scientist. I think I'm probably a little bit more effective at communicating. I think I have some other, secret sauce in there with creativity and some of these other things. But why can't I leverage those skills all together now and be as good as I can be in that space, rather than having to hide some of those skills and go this very proven route where I'd only be able to flex a specific number of them? To me, the creator path allowed me to do all the things that I was great at now and to establish myself in that far quicker than going through that more traditional route. I mean, obviously I had held data science roles. I still work in that domain, but I feel so much more upside in the things that I'm doing outside of my more clearly defined role, because I get to be myself, and literally no one is better at being Ken than I am. Right. And to be able to use all those things together, I think is unbelievably powerful. And when we're viewing ourselves as our businesses or ourselves as like what the product is, that to me is one of the most powerful things that could be possible. To be clear, that is not for everyone. If you're risk averse or you it doesn't have to be in the content creation space, but if you don't like the domains that are associated with creation, it's totally okay. I mean, I have some friends that, they make a lot of money every year. They're like, yeah, I'll be a software engineer making like $500K every year. I know I'm not going to make more than that, but I can retire in 5 years, right? Like, that's totally fine. You can do whatever you want. You can sip Mai Tais on your island or whatever it might be. But for me, I realized that I didn't want to wait all that time to be able to get to the places that I wanted to be. And I viewed that as such a clear path for me to at least have a shot at getting what I want out of my career as quickly as possible.
Well, for me, I don't want the game to be over.
Yeah.
That's that's what scared me the most when I saw my career plateauing. Or, I mean, it didn't really plateau. I just saw it off in the future. I looked at it and went, uh-oh, this is not going in the right direction. And so that's when I went into leadership, eventually went into strategy. But I always, no matter what career path I went on, I saw that plateau coming. And I thought, I don't want this game to be over. I don't. I want there to be another level until the end of my life.
Infinite game.
I want there to be another level. Like, if I run out of levels, I'm going to build them. I don't want to run out of levels because this is so interesting. It is so interesting being part of a game and figuring it out and, being able to then share it with other people and introduce people to the game. And all of that is just fascinating to me. I don't want to run out of those. I don't want to become an academic who teaches everybody about these games that I used to play back in the day, with my leather helmet and my old cleats hanging up. I don't want to be that person. I want to be continually playing in these interesting new games that are harder because I don't understand them very well, but that are fulfilling to explore in some cases, like this creator space. We're all kind of exploring this together and figuring out what this becomes. Almost like people that were founding businesses, 1900s were really defining what a business meant in capitalism, because that didn't exist. That sort of mobility didn't exist before, where someone who was middle class could start a business, put up a shingle and open their own shop and grow it and take the risks and do the hard work. And through luck and achievement, have us build a successful business and build a source of wealth for themselves. And that's, they were exploring it. They were figuring it out, and they were teaching each other some of the tricks and tips and things that you could do to get through it. And I think that's where we are in the creator space right now. There was a cycle in the 90s and early 2000s where startups were doing that. And we were figuring out startups, and there was that really exciting area through entrepreneurship. And I think, like I said, I think creator space now is in the same places as startups were in the mid to late 90s, where they're just figuring out, and we're all just figuring out what we could do with this and how this could work, and the dynamics of, you see all these supporting products that, again, back to data, all these supporting products, all these marketplaces, all of these things that we now use to enable us to provide services simply to anyone and at scale. Most of those are built on data, built on, machine learning models. And so it's interesting how data science is hooked into everything that's moving forward and moving quickly forward. And it's all, you dig into it further, far enough, and you find data scientists, and you find analysts, and you find interesting uses of data. You open enough doors at enough companies, and you're like, wait a minute, it's all data scientists?
And when it's not, they rip off a mask and they're actually a data scientist. Yeah.
You cut into it, it's all cake? Really?
I really liked what you were saying. This is putting words into your mouth a little bit, but that creation, to a certain extent, is the extension of entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. I think that, in my mind, that is the next logical step. I'm definitely quoting someone on this front, I don't remember who it is. So if anyone has any thoughts on that, feel free to let me know in comments. But the beautiful thing about content creation, right, is that if I put something out there and I say it, let's say it's a video, it is from me. Someone can say the exact same thing and it'll mean something different. The fact that you can establish stability or you can establish a competitive advantage from your brand is something that's unbelievably powerful. It's not necessarily completely uncopyable if we're talking about deep fakes or some of these other things, but that holds weight. Just because I said something versus someone else saying something, that makes it either more meaningful or less meaningful. And if we look at startups, yes, like it matters who's backing your company, it matters quite a lot of things, but someone in China could probably build half the apps out there in 2 weeks and just completely copy it. And would we know the difference? I mean, look at Amazon when we're buying a product. Let's say I needed an eBay brace. Like, do I really care the brand of the specific knee brace? Some people might, but I think the majority of people would think of that as commoditized. Content creation is very difficult to commoditize, in my opinion, at least as of now. If you're a first mover or if you've established a brand in that space. And so I really like that idea, is that, hey, like I can build a brand just because I'm saying something, or because I'm continuing to build this out, it means that I will be here around longer, because that's continually adding into that edge. I mean, granted, it goes the other way. If I say something stupid, like I'll get penalized for it, right? And people might never want to watch or engage or whatever it might be. But two sides to every coin, right?
Well, yeah, it's, but I think you can commoditize content that's garbage, and we have a lot of garbage. And I think that's the difference between mass media and creators. And I think that's the space for creators. Is when you look in the educational space, there are tons of garbage educational institutions out there. And creators who have been successful in the educational space are building out better. They're building out a style of teaching. And there are so many different learners that you're going to resonate with someone who's a creator, who's creating quality content, quality educational content, but who also figures out your learning style. And as a creator, you don't need to figure out like a billion people's learning style. You don't have to generalize in the way that the University of whatever does. They have to have, 100,000 students or 50,000 students. Whereas if you get 1,000 a year, you're happy. That's great. That's success right there. So we can specialize to audiences and grow different little niches that you can't do that unless you have, a really deep personal connection. And most companies, most businesses are thinking, okay, how am I going to scale? But they're thinking of scale in a two-dimensional way, where I've got this thing and I'm just going to do the same thing over and over again, but I'm going to just do it faster or bigger. Whereas creators aren't thinking about that kind of scaling. We're tacking on pieces of the community. So we're looking at another community that's adjacent to the one that we have right now and saying, I can appeal to that community too. And then we're tacking it on. And we're looking at another community. And eventually we are changing the dynamics of these communities that we slap together into our audience and following, and producing something that is not commoditizable, because we've built a deeper connection, a stronger brand, because we're not trying to appeal in the same mass-produced way that everyone else is. And I think that's the interesting piece of the creator economy, is that we're doing almost like a digital cottage industry, where content in many different forms, this concept of ideas being valuable is coming across, and we're able to deliver ideas in formats and packages, and just with us as the brand, that is in and of itself almost a mass production because of just this cottage industry. And I don't think you can commoditize that. I don't think you can create content that is that impactful in a genericized way. And so I think that's what the content and the creator sort of economy and the idea economy are revealing, is that there is this demand for something more complex, more tailored, and creators are able to do that. Creators are able to figure that out, whereas companies can't. A company, an organization can't do that because they're thinking, okay, we've had this one idea. Now we need to monetize that one idea and get as much value out of it as we can. Whereas a creator isn't thinking that way. A creator is saying, okay, I got a home run. Let's do another one. And that's always it. It's like, what's the next home run? Okay, I had a viral hit. What's the next one? It's like they're not capitalizing like Baby Shark. They're not doing a Baby Shark where there's an entire company that was built around Baby Shark. And they like, that's the whole company is Baby Shark. And it's in your head now. Thank you. So like that's the company. The creators don't work that way. The creators have a viral hit and they're like, oh, I need to get another viral hit. And whether that's a class offering, whether that's some sort of, digital product, out to the concept of, NFTs and all of that, like these are all extensions of the same creative thought process. And I think that's where it's not, it can't be commoditized.
I love that. I mean, there's a lot of parallels to that, and even a step back of what happened or what's continuing to happen with large companies versus small companies. We were talking before we hopped on this about how, for example, Google, the most, one of the largest tech companies in the world, they're big enough that they cannot move quickly enough on opportunities now that an individual entrepreneur, even like a content creator, can build something at significantly faster pace than Google, and inevitably they'll get bought out by Google, which is fine. That's usually what the game plan is, the exit strategy. But Google is no longer an innovation machine like it used to be. And in some fields like AI research, machine learning, it is. But in pure entrepreneurship, building products, building those types of things, it takes them significantly longer to build something than any entrepreneur off the street who's got a team, maybe has some extra money, whatever it might be. And I really like that idea that these small companies can still move fast. Like we can still compete with these giant companies because the nature of the business is different. Small entrepreneurs are still looking for that like viral hit in terms of a company, and they can act on that really quickly. And I think that that's sort of a beautiful thing, is that there still are opportunities in these different markets. There still are opportunities, even in localizing like a data science position, is that, depending on the company, depending on the situation, you can leverage your strengths and move faster or show an advantage, even when in the face of things, it doesn't look like you can. And, that sort of like strengths and weaknesses of different scenarios is something I always want to highlight, is like, think about the situation you're in. And like, let's say I'm a content creator. Well, I can make this course. I can do these things better than this university can. And I can, focus on that. Why would I try to do what the university is doing? Right. I have to know what my strengths are in my specific position. And that overarching concept, at least for me, has been unbelievably powerful. Like, let's narrow it down just to content creation. I know I have time to create a video a week historically. Why would I compete with those people that I know can make a video every week, trying to do something similar? It doesn't make sense. Try to trudge your own path, try to find those opportunities in that space. If I have the ability to afford like a better camera, or I have some more experience in that path, why not leverage those skills and make my own unique thing? I just think that this nuance or this customization of your individual situation to the problem at hand, it can't be addressed or hyped up enough.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things about the business model of a creator is they don't try to monetize one thing. Like they're not trying to figure out how to have one hit and then monetize it. It's one hit, it gets monetized, but that's it, because they're thinking about the next one. And what you'll see with big enough creators is they have a hit and then they're moving on to the next hit, but there are a whole bunch of creators being built around people copying that last hit of theirs. And there's like this entire segment of the creator economy that's built off of other people's hits. And so now you have this, you create a hit and it creates this wave of content creator creation, but you're onto something else. And so it's interesting. Companies stay behind to monetize that product and they milk it for all it's worth. And that's what slows them down. That's why they can't move fast enough, is because they're still trying to make money off that last product. Whereas a creator isn't. A creator made the one-time cash off of it. And then it's like, that's the world's now. And the world is going to do with it what they want to. The community is going to take it and make it something greater, but the creator is on to the next one. And the creator is creating something else that's new, that's going to be maybe a bomb, maybe a hit. And the great thing about being a creator is that you can bomb 4 or 5 times. Who cares? Yeah. If the 5th one, 6th one wins, that's all that matters. Now you've got a hit, and that'll propel you to the next thing that you're going to do. And you just leave that hit behind. It's like songwriters. It used to be you could be a one-hit wonder and survive. Now it's just album after album after album after album, content after content after content. And you're not really milking old stuff like you used to be. You're a creator and you're continually creating new things. And other artists are coming up because they do a remix of your song and they get famous because they remixed your hit. And, it's this cascading impact of creation where you create a community that's big enough and you create content that's powerful enough and you create enough, powerful winner products, but you pretty much leave it behind and say, this is now yours. What are you going to do with it? And I think that's the interesting part of what do we do with this paradigm? Because that's a social good company. If you really think about it, that's what we've all been sort of talking about when we say social good company, is someone who creates something, gets some value out of it, but leaves value for everybody else and allows everyone else to get some value out of it and build something of their own that other people get value out of. And it's, this true concept of trickle down, but it's trickle down innovation. And I think that's the power that we're going to realize with the creator economy, is that we don't just sit there static and milk it for all it's worth. We leave it, we take that one-time win and then leave it behind.
Yeah. Well, the beautiful thing also is that, after getting that one-time win, right, we don't have to do anything. It perpetuates itself. If other people copy it, like that still brings you traffic. That still gets you eyeballs. That creates opportunities for you. And to me, that's one of the craziest things is I could make a video, I could have made a video 2 years ago, and that could still get people interested in my content today. It could still help someone today. I don't have to do maintenance to it. It still lives and it perpetuates. Something that I definitely want to talk about with you is creating opportunity. And what does that look like? I've talked a lot about how producing content for me is something that not only does provide some form of income, not only is something that I love and enjoy and hopefully helps other people, but going out and creating those things, it opens up the world to me. Is I don't have to go out and find opportunities. Often they come to me.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about putting yourself out there is that your brand will resonate with people. And no matter what your brand is, and we see this for better or for worse, no matter how good or bad your brand is, it will resonate. I mean, there are Bismarckies out there who, his one-hit wonder was not what you would call a beautiful singing voice, but it was an amazing song. And so he nailed it because he just brought something authentic. And he created his own opportunity. Like that genre of music didn't exist before his song. And then after Bismarcky, there was not someone else who tried to copy that. Everyone looked at that and went, okay, no, that's yours. I got nothing for it. And that's the interesting thing about creating opportunities for yourself is if you go out and you try, you will find that your brand and your capabilities resonate with people. And that's all the way down to like kids in their high school can do this, where you as a high school student can build things that grade schoolers to grandparents, where it can resonate with them, because we all are on the same kind of journey. No matter where in that journey we all have insights to share. And I think that's the important thing to realize professionally is, and we realize this personally. We all talk about how you can learn a lot from kids. Kids have this kind of crazy wisdom. They understand more than we know. We say all these things. We say we can learn so much from children, and then we hire junior data scientists and we don't listen to them. How does that jive? And so professionally, I think from the concept of creating opportunity, we have to create opportunities to be taught. We have to create opportunities for people to contribute in unique ways that we haven't thought of before. But it's the same thing if you're just breaking into a job or breaking into a field. You have to create opportunities for yourself, because many times your leader doesn't understand that they need to be creating opportunities for you. Many times leadership doesn't know what unique capabilities you bring to the job, or what you could possibly teach the entire organization right now that they don't realize you can do. And so you have to create opportunities for yourself. You have to look for opportunities to contribute, and you have to be persuasive enough. And this is why I look at data science, and if you spend the majority of your time interviewing candidates, and it's a coding interview, it's a math technical stats interview, and then you start asking them, deep implementation questions, I think to myself, okay, so you've measured like the cheap 20% capability, where the real important 80% capability is the ability to learn, the ability to work with others for impact, the ability to communicate effectively and persuade. Communications for impact and persuasion, that's 80% of your career. And so all you've done is assess this person's lowest possible capabilities. And that's a company that doesn't want to give you an opportunity other than the one that it's giving you. It doesn't see the potential to give you other opportunities. And so you have to make them. You have to showcase those capabilities in any way that you can. And that's really the interesting thing about creating opportunities for yourself, is these are skills that you're going to use your entire career, but no one's really digging into them during a job interview. And so we get trained into thinking that being able to identify opportunities and capitalize on them, and figure out ways that we can capitalize on those opportunities and avoid threats, the way we can identify threats and avoid them. We're trained to think that those aren't really important capabilities. Those are soft skills, but they're not. Those are some of the most important skills that you have as an individual throughout your career and your life, really. And so if you want to create opportunities for yourself, it's more about seeing what opportunities are out there and then being able to execute, being able to showcase your ability to pursue that opportunity and be successful, and then lining up something for the business. It's not all about you. It isn't all about what the business will do for you. A lot of these interactions have to start with what you can do for them. And this is why you should give me the opportunity. And that's a lot about building up a track record of success, being able to deliver to the business. So opportunity comes when you've been successful a few times, when you've been able to execute a few times. And there's all these interesting soft skills that go into creating capability, or go into creating opportunities for yourself. And we don't assess any of them. As a business, I would think that would be the first thing you would want to check. Can this person identify an opportunity and then take advantage of it? Can this person learn a new skill? Will they grow? Will they want to be a bigger contributor? Will they want to introduce new ideas to the organization? Will they keep us dynamic? Will they be able to keep up with the trajectory of growth that the company has? And we don't assess any of that. So a lot of people at pretty much every stage in their career don't understand how important all those things are, especially in technology. We're so focused on, how many years of Java do you have? Or, can you write back propagation out from memory or something stupid like that? And, that matters, but it doesn't long term, not as important.
Well, I think a lot of the challenge there is that those are very easy to measure, and or easier to measure.
Yeah.
And one thing that you brought up to me before is that, a lot of the times the people who are hiring, right, the people who are more advanced in the career, they're still trying to figure it out too. Data science hasn't been around that long. The people who are senior, they don't have case studies. They don't have things to show them the path of what's going to be important in hiring, what's going to be important for the business. And it's very easy to fall into the trap of chasing things or evaluating things that are the easiest to evaluate, or that have been evaluated historically or whatever that might be. And I think that that's something that's, again, you told me this, it's important to remember that for data scientists, especially in this domain, like, there's so much that the next people don't know. It's pretty important to figure out stuff yourself, or think rationally about what's going to be important for my career.
Yeah, we don't all have it figured out. And you look at leadership and you assume because somebody has a VP title that they have some sort of superior insight. And as soon as you realize that's not true, and that there are people who don't know what they're doing at every level of every organization, and politics and life and everything. There are people who understand that their job is just to hold it together when no one else can. And in the startup, that's especially true. If you ask most CEOs in startups, do you have this down? If they're in front of the VCs, they're like, oh yeah, of course. Here, let me show you my slide deck, and let me show you projections. And so next year you get 2 drinks in them, and you get them talking casually to another founder, and it's like, I have no idea what's going on here. I get this all the time where I'll be talking to people who run other consulting companies, and we'll sit down. It's 2 drinks later where we're going, okay, so I've had this happen. Do you know what that's about? Do you have any idea what they were talking about? Why didn't, what? And we are confused. But as soon as we get done with that interaction, we have to have it all together, because if we don't, who does?
Yeah.
And that's what you have to look at people and understand, is that captain mentality, where a captain never says, I don't know. Why? Because if you don't know, who does? If you don't know, we're all dead. And that's really what you feel like when you run a business, or when you're in an organizational leadership role. It's like, you don't have that 30 seconds to tell people, hey, I don't know, and have them respond well to that. And you really have to train people when you're going to say, I don't know, to your people on a regular basis. You have to train them for that, because I do that a lot with the teams I lead. They'll ask me a question. It's like, I don't know, but I can figure that out. I'll get that for you. And the first time I do it, I can see the panic. Like, they jump in, and I've heard this thing where they'll start asking me the same question in a different way, like trying to get me to get the answer. And I was like, no, it's okay. I don't have to know this right now. We're not going to die. No, the business does not go under if I don't know this by the end of today. I can find out next week, and it will still be cool. We're not going out of business. It's okay not to know everything. And you create an interesting dynamic in the team when it's okay not to know, when it's 100% okay to just go, and the honesty allows for learning, because there's probably somebody in that room that does. And so when I don't know, it gives people oxygen to know and to be smarter than me, and for that to be cool.
That's powerful. Something that I'm finding more often than not is when I'm approached with any data science problem, I often don't know, but the track record suggests that I could figure it out, right?
Yep.
And a lot of people new to this domain, I think they're very scared in their first role to admit that they don't know how to do something, or admit that the timelines that were set probably aren't realistic, because they're going to have to learn this whole thing from scratch. And that's common. That happens in almost every new role, is you're not going to know, and you're going to have to learn it. But that is literally the job, is you not knowing stuff and learning it as quickly as you can, and then throwing it together. And so you're not going to make it that long in this field, in my opinion, if you don't realize that and you don't get used to it. Like, if you want zero ambiguity, or if you don't want to have that feeling where, I'm completely clueless about this, I need to study up and implement, there are plenty of other great careers.
Yes.
It's just something that comes with this territory. That's something that I love. It paralyzes me sometimes. There's plenty of projects that I've wanted to do, and I've been like, I don't know how to do this. It's going to take me probably too long for me to learn this, to be able to execute this in this period of time. But I do know that if I sat down, I could do it. But it's a time crunch, right? Opportunity cost of
Mhm.
time. That's why I didn't do those projects. It was not, hopefully, ever, because I could not like conceivably do it. And yeah, I mean, within this field, I just think you have to get used to it.
You need irrational confidence to be a data scientist. And there's other jobs that you need this for, but you need irrational confidence. And that's what I'll tell people that a lot, is that you need irrational confidence in yourself. And that's
In
the
yourself, but
only
don't
way.
let other people that directly. You don't want to be arrogant, but you need irrational confidence.
Well, and it's not arrogance, and that's the difference between irrational confidence and somebody who's toxic just as a person. Is irrational confidence is somebody says, here's this ridiculous problem. I'm going to give it to you. And you go, okay, that's irrational confidence. Not there's no, and you hear engineers do this all the time, where you'll give them a really complex problem and they're like, and they spend the next hour telling you why it can't be done. And then, and I've had smart engineers that were like that, where I had to spend the hour listening to all the reasons why it couldn't be done. And then they start talking to themselves about a third of the way through the meeting. They'll start talking to themselves like, well, I could, let me look into, and then all of a sudden they've talked themselves into taking the project, but I have to listen to them for an hour, tell me why they can't do it. And that's the difference between like arrogance and irrational confidence, is you don't make me go through that as a leader for an hour. You say, okay, you go back to your desk and you do that to yourself. Don't do that to me, please. But that's irrational confidence. You just say, okay, and you take it and you try to run with it. And that's a data science, because if you do the default approach, the majority of the time you're wrong. It doesn't work that way. It's not going to be effective. You're going to have to figure out one way or the other how to customize, or, because import from really just doesn't do it anymore. You're not solving complex problems with the import from. You're not going to Power BI your way through, high value solutions anymore. That stuff's already really been plowed at a lot of different companies. So as a data scientist, you're just expected to do more. And that means you have to figure it out. I mean, you always start out assuming that the go-to solution is going to work. It never does. And the faster you get away from, I'm going to try it the easy way first, rather than I'm going to research the problem first, the sooner you get to that irrational confidence, where, I can research the problem space, and I've had to create my own solutions so much that I'm just assuming I'm going to have to do that again.
Yeah, I think there's just immense power in being able to work with what you got. And that's almost always what you run into, is that some part of the process might not be your job, is going to break.
Yep.
And in order for what you do to work, you're going to have to fix it, or you're going to have to adapt a system or create something to make it better or efficient, or even just manageable. And to a lot of people, that's terrifying. To a lot of people, that's really fun, is that this is just a problem, and all problems in some sense have solutions. And is it a problem if it doesn't have a solution? That's like kind of a paradoxical thing. I actually don't know the answer to that question that I pose it, but I digress. Honestly, those are the main questions that I had. I think we covered a lot in this episode. Yeah. And I want to leave the floor open to you if you have any parting words of wisdom, if you have any causes you care about, and also if there's a best place to reach you. Where can people find you?
Easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. You can also find me on Twitter. If you just Google Vin Vashishta, you find way too much of me. So easy way to connect that way. Always feel free to book me if you want to. I'll always take money. If you want to hire me, I'm very happy to do that too. But no, I think that my parting words of wisdom, and really the cause I care about right now, is to say, look, everybody's going through something right now. And so be nicer than you normally would. Be better to people than you normally would. Right now, everybody's the cause that we should care about. And everyone's going through something right now. So give everybody just a little bit more love than you normally would. And I think you'll be happier in your life too. It's not always about professional capabilities. Every once in a while, that interpersonal capability, being able to give somebody a little bit of latitude, help them out a little bit more than you normally would, can help your career go a long way.
I love it. A little extra aloha.
Yep. Just give it a little aloha.
Excellent. Vin, this was an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.